Raptors center Jakob Poeltl is on possibly the hottest stretch of his NBA career, and he could be the answer the Raptors needed, not just on the floor, but off the floor as well. Let me explain why in today's video. Let's get into it. This is Amateur Sports, the YouTube channel dedicated to Toronto Raptors content in live stream watch-alongs and videos like this on the channel. If you enjoyed this video along the way, make sure to hit that like button and you can subscribe as well for more content just like it. Keep a lookout. Amateur merch drops November 29th with shirts, hats, and stickers. Hopefully the Canada Post strike is over when we get to that point. But Jakob Poeltl is the topic of conversation for today's video because he has been on an absolutely monstrous run of form over the last 3 games. The Toronto Raptors are dealing with plenty of injuries, not a lot of personnel out there, and you're kind of wondering where the points are going to be coming from with this team, especially when you look at the caliber. Well, you look at the caliber of the starting lineup, you look at the caliber of the players coming off the bench. Where are the points going to come from? Well, in the last 3 games, a massive chunk of those points have come from Jakob Poeltl. A lot of the strategy around the game has revolved around a little bit more RJ Barrett ball handler in the pick and roll, and a lot more running the offense through Poeltl. He's been always a tremendous player in the high post, passing out of those areas. He's always been super efficient on the inside, but what's been the most impressive about this run of games here is that he's been able to scale up his production while not sacrificing his efficiency. I mean, just have a look at these numbers here. Just ridiculous stuff here. As if we thought the Pistons one was ridiculous enough, where he had 25 points, 18 rebounds, 12 of 20 shooting from the field. And in that game, he actually ended the game with 25 points, 20 rebounds. They ended up taking away 2 of those rebounds later on. But still, we thought that was impressive. He followed it up with a 35-point performance against the Boston Celtics in Boston with 12 rebounds on 16 of 19 shooting. And then, if that wasn't enough, how about 3 in a row? Goes for 30 points, 15 rebounds against the Indiana Pacers, 13 of 18 shooting from the field. That one actually a win for the Toronto Raptors as well. Jakob Poeltl has just been sensational. We've talked about previously, the Jakob Poeltl floaters, the right-handed push shots in the paint are seemingly automatic. But, typically we're seeing this guy taking, looking at his numbers from previous seasons, even with the Raptors last season, 7.6 field goal attempts per game on the whole season for the Raptors last year. Typically, he's a guy who's taking maybe 7, 8, 9 shots per game. Well, we've scaled it up this season to 12 field goal attempts per game, and we haven't really sacrificed much of the efficiency. This year, he's averaging a career high in points. His previous career high was 13.5. This year, he's averaging 17.1. His previous career high in rebounds on a full season was 9.3. This year, he's averaging 11.9. It's just the efficiency. Look, I said he scaled it up, not really sacrificing efficiency. Okay. Last season, he averaged 65.6% shooting from the field, which was a career high, or very close to a career high, actually. This year, he's averaging just a measly 61% shooting from the field. So, yeah, some very impressive numbers, a lot of numbers in the career high categories. That 35-point game against the Boston Celtics was a single game point career high for the players. So it's just been fantastic. And as I said, with the title, with the intro, he's the answer to the Raptors' problems. We look back on that trade the Raptors made with the San Antonio Spurs. If I could go back, I still wouldn't make that trade. I know I'm singing the praises here. That trade and why I don't like it, giving up the pick that became the 8th overall pick from the most recent NBA entry draft. The pick why I didn't like it, it prolonged the inevitable, which was a tank and a rebuild for the Raptors, which we are in right now. And it gave away a pretty key draft asset to bring in Poeltl. I didn't like the trade, but that was never a question about Jakob Poeltl's ability as a player. I thought Poeltl was a fantastic acquisition, just not for the price and not for the time of the trade that when the Raptors made it at that trade deadline in 2023. Regardless, he's here. He's a fantastic player, and on court, he's the answer to a lot of problems. We saw how bad the Raptors were that season before bringing in a traditional center who could actually protect the rim. They weren't a whole lot better with him there, but they certainly improved with Jakob Poeltl and having that defensive anchor, that defensive presence, and having somebody who, can clean up a little bit on the inside as well, add a big rebounding threat to your team. Last season, it was a disaster year for the Raptors. They won 25 games. It was hard to really understand the impact of Poeltl when we saw him out there. I think the impact we saw when Poeltl wasn't on the floor was the bigger thing. The Raptors last season, like, I know they only won 25 games, but Jakob Poeltl played 50 games. He missed 32 games. In the 32 games that Jakob Poeltl missed due to injury or whatever reason, Raptors only won 4. So he does go underappreciated. He does go underrated by a lot of Raptors fans. And I continue to see the conversation surrounding Jakob Poeltl and how he doesn't fit with the timeline. He doesn't fit with the team. They need a stretch center. They need this. They need that. They don't need Jakob Poeltl. A lot of Raptors fans say that the Raptors should trade him. Well, on floor, he certainly is the answer to a lot of problems. They are clearly a far superior team with him in compared to when he's not in. And we see with things like that from last season. We see with his on-court product this season. But now all of a sudden, does he become too good that now you should trade him? Because Jakob Poeltl, as he was a player making $19.5 million per year, that great defensive anchor, good interior presence, there's a lot of like top caliber NBA teams that would want and could use a player just like that. But the Raptors, I think I've always said, I've always said the Raptors, for the development purposes, it helps the young guys to have that sort of presence defensively. It makes it easier for them to do their job as a defender and work on their game to have that defensive presence. So that's why I've been adamant that you should hang on to Jakob Poeltl unless you get this fantastic offer, but I wouldn't be going out to seek a trade. Well, now some people are asking me, does he become too good to keep? Like, this is so good that certainly you need to cash in on this little stretch here and say, okay, let's seriously consider what's out there for the player. And maybe that's where Jakob Poeltl can be the answer to the Raptors off the floor as well and bring in some young talent for the future. What does that trade look like? What could that possibly be for Poeltl? Well, that's where the difficulty comes into play here. Like I said, a lot of good teams could use a player like Jakob Poeltl, but a lot of good teams kind of already have their center. Jakob Poeltl's a starting center. Like, this is not your guy coming off the bench here. This is your starting center. This is your defensive anchor. So a team would need to have a complete vacancy in the center position for this trade to really make sense. Last season, the conversation would have been around the Oklahoma City Thunder. Well, in the offseason, they signed Isaiah Hartenstein on a massive contract. I know he's injured, but that's the guy they banked on. They gave him that money. A team last year who could have really used Jakob Poeltl for this upcoming season was the Memphis Grizzlies, but they drafted Zach Edey, which took away their need to really make a play here. Now, Zach Edey's moved to the bench. Questions continue to come. Is that going to be your solidified starting center for years to come? But the fact that they drafted him as early as they did, he was a top 10 pick. I think it was a top 10 pick. He was a top 10 pick. I don't think they're going to be shelling out assets here to bring in Jakob Poeltl. I mean, they could, but I'm not so sure about that. And looking through the rest of some of the top teams across the NBA, you know, the Celtics don't need a center. The Cavs don't need a center. The Knicks have Cat. Miami have Bam. Pacers have Miles Turner. The Bucks have Brook Lopez. The Sixers have Joel Embiid going to the Western Conference. The Thunder have Hartenstein. The Lakers have AD. The Rockets have Alperen Sengun. The Nuggets have Jokic. The Grizzlies, as we said, are covered there. The Timberwolves have Gobert. The Kings have Sabonis. And just looking through here, like maybe a couple of these teams that could want to make a run, like the Phoenix Suns could really use a much better center than Jusuf Nurkic. Like, if the Suns want to be serious, I think they should get a replacement for Jusuf Nurkic. And the Warriors could still do with that defensive presence there. I actually think he'd fit quite well there. So maybe that's a couple of teams that could look for a player like Poeltl in the Warriors and the Suns. But in the end, not a lot of options for a trade there. So it becomes a little bit complicated for Poeltl. And it becomes even more complicated for the Raptors when you look at the contract situation. Fantastic contract, by the way. He's making $19.5 million right now. He makes $19.5 million next season as well. And then he has a player option the year after that worth $19.5 million. Now, the way Hardenstein got paid, he made over $30 million, I think, per season. Claxton got 25 plus. Jakob Poeltl, if he's continuing to play like this or anything close to this, he's making a whole lot more than $19.5 million. When that player option kicks in, he might decide to opt out of that. When that player option kicks in, he's going to be 31 years old. Now the conversation becomes, do we keep Poeltl? Do we trade him? Does it become easier to trade him now? You look at how Siakam unfolded. We didn't trade him soon enough. We didn't get a good enough of a trade. So that could be where some problems arise. For me, right now, I'm hanging on to Jakob Poeltl, but certainly, boomer way of saying it, but I'll keep the phone lines open. We're taking calls on this. If there's a team that's really out there trying to pursue a player of Jakob Poeltl's quality, then, listen to what they have. But I'm not making the outgoing phone call shopping Jakob Poeltl around the league. I do think he's an important player for this team. I do think he's an important player towards development. The fact that he can't space the floor is not a huge indictment against his game. He's a fantastic player. He's proving it right now, seemingly on a night-to-night basis. And even when he's not, putting up 30 points per game in a 3-game stretch, he's still like the most consistent guy and the most reliable guy that this Raptors team has. That's worth keeping, but soon, definitely, with the contract situation you're looking at it, with the big situation for maybe a couple of those Western Conference teams, maybe field some phone calls and see just what is out there. And that's how he can become not only the answer on the court, but perhaps off the court as well, to bring in some fresh assets to really spark this rebuild into motion. So what do you make of Jakob Poeltl's run here? What do you make of the possibility of trading him? I think ultimately for me, don't trade him right now, unless the big offer that you can't refuse comes in. But give me your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below, because that's it for today's video. Drop a like if you enjoyed. Make sure you subscribe to the channel for more Raptors content just like this. I'll see you next time for another video, and keep your eyes out. Keep a lookout. Amateur merch drops November 29th.